The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Michael Connor from cloudy Portland, Oregon on the 3rd of June, 2020. I think the 3rd of June, 2020, all of that is a little like, wow, really? Here we are. Who else do we have on the line here? I'm with the Early Learning Division. How about you?
This is Lindsay Pearson. I'm also with the Early Learning Division and happy to be here.
Hi, this is Teresa Waite on the phone with the Early Learning Division and glad to see and hear everyone.
Good morning, Gwen Bachtel, Early Learning Division. Scrolling through all the attendees, it's just nice to see the names. Okay.
And Donna, you want to say hi too? You're on camera there and everything.
Good morning. Yes, I know. Others should join me with their cameras.
Well, that's something we're going to talk about. So thank you. I am going to show some slides here which have an agenda, and that is what I'm going to do next if I'm good enough and smart enough, because doggone it. Waiting to view Teresa's screen. Hey Teresa, would you like to make me the presenter, or would you like to present?
Oh, I guess it's because I logged on first today. Yes, I would love to make you the presenter, Michael.
Great.
Oh, it's asking me if I'm sure that's what I want to do.
Well,
I do.
okay. You'll note that Andy's name is a late scratch. A late scratch, as they say in baseball. She's not able to join. She's on a hiring committee and just can't make it today. So we do have some updates from her though, which brings me really to the next slide, which is about our agenda. But before we go into our agenda, I went too fast. Gwen, I think we wanted to just sort of talk about what's going on and read a statement.
Yeah, I think Lindsay was going to do a welcome and yeah.
Yeah, my cat is trying to join, so please forgive me. So in light of recent events, sorry, is very involved. In light of recent events, we've all felt pretty heavy as to what is happening for our communities, for our families, for our Black, specifically our Black families. And we received this wonderful email from our director, and we were all very proud to have a leader who's in tune and just compassionate as we do. And so we wanted to share her message with you. These directly relate to our work, and this directly relates to the children and families we serve. So I'm just going to read it for you. The early childhood period is when racial identity begins to develop. By age 4, children have formed ideas and conceptions about race that will form the basis of their own identity. A mentor of mine, of Miriam's, refers to the way that children learn about racial identity as the hidden curriculum on race. Our work is about finding ways to make this visible. Standards for programs and children's learning in curriculum and other resources we provide to programs. We all have a role to play in doing a much better job of supporting positive racial identity development in young children and interrupting the early childhood practice that sends a message to young children that who they are in their own skin, the language they speak, and the children and their lived experiences. Look at this, I'm sorry. I should put him in. And their lived experiences is not valid in our society. How might we create the kind of change that allows all of our young children to begin kindergarten believing that they had a voice and ideas that were respected and acknowledged? We also know that many of the adults in our field any of your staff, are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, educators, program directors, family child care providers, home visitors, and others, and that our work to regulate, monitor, and provide technical assistance must not recreate biases and inequitable opportunities. To truly succeed at this, it will take continued commitment to examine our own individual and collective actions. Our equity work must be grounded in the understanding of how historical structural and institutional racism perpetuates what is considered normal in the here and the now. And that we found that as a call to action, really. All of us at the Early Learning Division, as Miriam is stating, have a responsibility to creating policies and developing resources that support the positive identity development of all children, but specifically Black children and children of color and Indigenous children. And so we hear that call, and we will be responding to it. And so that's a call for all of you as well. And so look forward to hearing from us. I'm sure we're going to be, wanting to know what you know about your children, your families, their needs, how this trauma is affecting them, and how we're going to need to respond to it in the fall and even the summer when our kiddos show up. So thank you. I appreciate that time.
Thank you, Lindsay. And we here at the Early Learning Division hope all of you are well and safe. So, but we wanted to start with a message around equity and just acknowledging the difficult times right now. So, Michael, should we go to the agenda?
We should.
And before I get on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little on the surface for me, I guess.
Yeah, just one moment, because there's late breaking news here of a good kind, which is that rumors of Andy Bales Molnar not attending turned out to be just that, rumors. So as soon as I can get the silly old thing to get out of the way, I can go back here. Oh, there's always something. No, that was the wrong thing. Okay. Anyway, Andy, you're unscratched. Earlier you were scratched, but you will be on the agenda today.
And I appreciate that, and I apologize for any complaints, snafus, and I appreciate you all being so flexible. But I am here. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. And I am able to be here till about 9:30, and then I am going to jump right back into some more interview panels, because the work continues, and we continue to bring on really great people to serve the children and families and professionals all around Oregon.
Thank you, Andy. So I'm not sure who wants to take the lead on this, but just going over the agenda. I can. We do have an update around the RFA, of course, how we're doing on the awards, and how we proceeded through the review committees, and following up around salary plans. We have a budget and revenue forecast, somewhat cloudy forecast. I think maybe you all can help me. Let's make sure that Andy's coordinated enrollment part gets in earlier than the agenda. We do want to talk about the new ELD temporary order. We have some grant updates. We have some stuff on respite care grants. A little bit with our colleague Nathan around extended duration training and technical assistance opportunities. And we end with resources, as we usually do. So it's a packed agenda. And when we leave, let's make sure we talk about the platform question, okay? So without any delay then, talk about the RFA, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And I think before we start, there were a couple of things in the chat box, in the question box. And one was from Robert asking if he could turn his camera on. And he doesn't see the icon, so I think he wanted to address that. And then Darcy asked if we can share Miriam's message that she'd like to share it with staff. And of course, Darcy, we can forward that on to all of you. the message. It was just an excerpt that we took, but it was really there was more to the message around just the impact of programming and how valuable it is in social justice work. So of course we can send that on to you in the whole group. So Michael, did you want to talk briefly about
Sure.
cameras and all of that for technical assistance?
So yes, thank you. And that's a great question, Robert. So we would like to see your faces, and we've figured out that GoToWebinar is not particularly friendly to that. This particular platform of GoToWebinar is more about there's some people on stage and then there's people in the audience. And sometimes that's a really good platform, like if you're doing a webinar, but with 100 people. But we are interested in having more of a meeting, and we switched to GoToWebinar because it has some features like having a poll or having attachments to the meeting that were useful. But we've rethought that decision in wake of wanting to, this is really our only chance to see each other for the foreseeable future, and we'd like to have your ideas and your excitements and your concerns more part of the meeting. So with that, we are going to switch back to GoToMeeting. So that's going to involve calendar invites that we'll send out that you can forward to other people in your program. There's no registration for GoToMeeting. You just have to have the link. So that'll be coming up for the July meeting. For the July meeting, we'll be switching over to GoToMeeting. And that way we can have a lot more people on camera and a lot more interaction. That's our hope. So thank you for teeing that up, Robert. Perfectly. It's like a plant. It's like I'm seeing it's somebody from Eastern Oregon, climbs rocks. Oh my gosh, it's you. Initials, I see a C and an R, like that. So thoughts on that, questions, comments, feel free to put them in the chat box, raise your hand, we can unmute you. But that's what we're gonna do for July, switch over. So be on the lookout for an invitation or two from us about that.
We got some thumbs up starting in the chat box. Thanks,
Great.
Leslie.
Great, thanks, Leslie. Okay, so on to the RFA.
Yeah. Whoops. I think we just stay on the agenda side for a second there.
Good.
Michael.
Yep.
Yeah. So some of you have already probably received, but I know you're probably just starting your morning. So it depends on what time or who it was sent to, but all of you as applicants for the OPK RFA have now received a notification through SurveyMonkey Apply that there is a delay in our intent to award for all of our RFAs associated with the early investment account. This is due to sort of, as you all know, and probably all of us could have predicted this, and we were kind of going, forward as planned. But as we get to the point of actually putting in amounts and service levels into the intent to awards, we really need to base that on the available funding. And as you know, that's been a little bit of a moving deal. It's almost like a fun, like a funny house or a fun house that it's going back forward. And so we're waiting to get some more definitive numbers, but we are moving forward, meaning that all of the information from the review committees is being forwarded to Miriam. She's already been reviewing some materials. We've been working with Sarah and really trying to, be ready as we can for being able to put in actually the dollar amounts when we have something firm. So, so we apologize for that delay. We're not anticipating it to be a long delay, but we know that this will create some stress, I'm sure, because we know as we delay the intent to award, the potential for delaying full, executing the grant becomes a potential, and we're still really focused on just really compressing that schedule so that as soon as we know our intent to awards, that we have all the grant materials ready to go, and that will be a pretty simultaneous sort of out the door to all of you. like I said, so you'll receive, if you haven't already, and it might have gone to, it probably went to whoever was identified as the individual who submitted your grant, or your grant application. So you might want to check with that individual if it wasn't you. But also there will be a letter coming out to all early learning partners today, informing all of you as well that there's a delay in the intent to award. So it'll be coming at you in two places, I'm sure, an applicant and a early learning partner. So I think, and I know we wanted to kind of pause and, you know, we want this, I know next month it'll be a little bit easier. We'll have a different format. This webinar format isn't as user-friendly for commenting, but please put questions in the chat box. We really need your input and your thoughts and your concerns as we're moving this process forward as the timelines continually get compressed. So please, we love you to be our think partners, and we want to understand, like I said, the impact that this has. I mean, we can assume, you know, some impacts, but the individual impact on your grant are kind of unique to each of you with this potential delay. So that being said, I'm not seeing, okay, still, okay, do you have estimates for the award notice, Stephanie? Thank you for these questions coming in. Stephanie, as you, we would love to have a definitive date as well. And we don't have one right now. The letter that has been sent out, you know, states that we don't anticipate a long delay. So we're trying to, but, you know, that's pretty vague. So I apologize that I can't be more specific. Yeah, I don't know, quite honestly. And I think that's just where we're at right now with it. But if I do hear anything more definitive, we will inform you as soon as possible. Still curious about prioritizing enhancements versus expansion. Great question, Darcy. So what I can share with you about that is it's in the early investment account, the way that the funding is, it's actually line items. It's not just like one bucket for Oregon pre-kindergarten, prenatal through kindergarten services. There was funds for the enhancements and like duration, salaries that was in one line item, and some expansion of part day. So all of that was sort of wrapped up into that one line item. And then there was a line item for the early Head Start expansion. So like I said, so most of the enhancements are in the kind of the preschool line, if you want to call it that, it's like preschool plus enhancements, and then early Head Start. But the early Head Start line item would include, you know, sort of those, if you're increasing salaries for teachers and teacher assistants, like your cost per child for your infant and toddler programming would also, you know, incorporate that as well. So it's sort of kind of gets blended in a little bit, sort of with early Head Start funding for those type of enhancements. So if we're looking at, so Darcy, to sort of answer your question, so I think it's going to depend on if, you know, if it's a straight cut across each line item, then it'll be an even cut, you know, to enhancements and to early Head Start and the expansion of early Head Start. So I hope that answers it. But if there's any way that we have the ability to kind of prioritize in there, that's to be learned. And I know Donna mentioned that all of you are having, I think, a meeting tomorrow. And I think that, you know, there's some, I think as an association and sort of your advocacy work, and I think there's some strategies that you're all working on to, you know, promote your, you know, your needs and also your priorities. So, so I think that'll help as well, and, you know, sort of advising and advocating with the governor's office and legislators. So can you give us some general idea, best guess about the time frame? Do you think the intent to award will be announced within 2 weeks by the end? Yes, yes. Thank you, Marguerite, for that. Yeah, I you know, it's pretty vague. I'm sorry to Stephanie's, because I would love to say like by the end of next week, or, you know, but I'm not sure. But don't anticipate us going beyond 2 weeks, and definitely not the end of June, because as you all know, we have, if it were delayed that long, just so you know, we would kind of go into a plan B, because we do have, you know, some current GS funding. There's, you know, some ability for us to figure out how to use those existing funds, even though there's, you know, going to be a reduction on that revenue source as well, but we do have that available. And so there are some options for us to be able to, you know, start to do potentially some grant agreements, and then amend later whenever we know final numbers. And I can just imagine Teresa's like, no, not amendments. That is not our goal, not our first choice. But we recognize that because it's sort of an unusual biennium where your grants all end on June 30th, that we need to sort of ensure that there's a mechanism for you to be able to access, you know, new grant funds as soon as possible in July, knowing that typically the drawdown is in August. But, you know, we, like I said, we're very aware of the tight time frame. So I'm hoping, Marguerite, yes, I'm going to hopefully, but please, you know, I don't control these things. So lots of moving parts, but I think when we said not a long delay, that I would anticipate more than 2 weeks. And so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed on that. And still no carryover, right? We don't, to that, again, we don't have a way to carry over because the grants, they end. So, yeah, so that's, and we need to start the new grants July 1st. So, and then I don't know, Teresa, if you wanted to say anything else about the carryover.
I don't know that I could say a whole lot. The grants in, like kind of what you said, the grants in June 30. And so
yeah,
that's about all I could say.
Yeah, but we'll, so Darcy's the question is like, you know, we'll be looking at all different options for us to continue funding. Like, I mean, I think that's, you know, so that's, you know, our top priority as well. Okay, there's some questions flying in. Let's see. Where am I at here in the questions? Answers. Okay, let's see that one. Okay, I have a question about the, this came from Marcy. I have a question about the state deadlines for grant work, specifically June 29th, grant agreement to be completed and executed. Subsequent to that, submit electronic copies of the following. I'm confused about continuing grants and new grants and the expectation for submission of the grant agreement by the end of June. Given the delay, what do we do? Yeah, Marcy, great question. So I'm just trying to kind of tease this out a little bit, confused about continuing grants and new grants. Teresa, because we don't have any continuing grants, correct?
Correct. All grants are ending. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, Gwen, but I know Andy's about to leave, and did we want to give her a couple minutes before she left? It's almost 9:30.
Andy?
I'm good either way. You know, I was just going to give a couple quick updates around coordinated enrollment, but I also understand that, you know, funding is pretty important and getting clarification around those. There's not a lot of enrollments or coordinating without our funding and making sure that we're doing that well. So I'm more than happy to pause on my updates and allow folks to focus on the more pressing front of the brain issues. This is important stuff too.
I apologize, Andy. I wasn't tracking your time. I apologize on that one.
Don't worry about it. My time is not everyone's priority right now. That's fine. I understand.
So let's answer these two questions and then give you a few minutes. Yeah, Teresa, go ahead and finish the thought on this one.
Yep, absolutely. So there are no continuing grants. As we mentioned several times in the last few months, what you were applying for during this process was not just expansion, but your continuation of your grant, or in this case, to take your slots into the new year with a new grant. And so there will still be documents and other things with due dates for the new grant, as well as some things to wrap up the old grant. And I will work with Michael and Lindsay to get a clarified listing out of what is due for which grant, so that everyone's on the same page. And as far as reduction, I want to leave some of that to you, but reduction is a budget reduction. So it's going to really be dependent upon the final numbers. That's the next question that Annie was asking.
Yeah, Annie's question is, and I like to read them just because I'm not sure if everyone can see them, if they're just maybe calling in. So, and it's also tiny. So Annie's question is, did you say the existing grants will be reduced, but expansion or new money is going to be awarded? So I think I'm going to kind of parse that out a little bit, Annie. So your current grants is general funds, and then the expansion dollars and enhancement funds are coming through the early investment account. Yet those, in a sense, it becomes like it's the general funds and the early investment account dollars that become the money that's available for all of the services that you are providing. And so it becomes then, at the state, it sort of becomes the bucket of money for OPK services. But like I said earlier, there are certain line items in the early investment account that might kind of box us in a little bit on our ability to kind of make internal decisions with you around priorities, more early Head Start, more duration. So that might be just decided for us because of the way the early investment account budgets are, how they're the line item categories. So that being said, I think to your question though, is the existing, when you're asking about existing grants, those are general funds. We are anticipating a reduction in general funds as well. And we are anticipating a reduction in the expansion dollars. So there are reductions on both funding sources. Both revenue streams will have a reduction in the second year of this biennium. All right, so Andy, you have to leave at 9:30. I know that we were planning on covering for you because we weren't expecting you, so I'm glad you were able to pop in though.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah.
Okay.
So does that mean that we're gonna talk more about the RFA? Is that what we're doing now?
I wasn't sure if Andy, do you have to hop off or did you want a few minutes right now?
I mean, I just have a couple minutes updates, maybe a minute or two, and then if folks have some questions that we may or may not be able to answer at this point, I can do that in the next 2 minutes if that works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
great.
so we'll kind of put a pause on the RFA update, and maybe that'll give some people some time to think about some questions as well. So that'll be great. And so, Angie, you have go for it.
Great.
Can you
Thank
move
you.
that slide, Michael? The coordinated enrollment slide?
Sure.
Oh.
I'll do that. Go ahead. You start talking, Andy, and
Thanks.
I'll.
Okay. So I wanted to just use this time to give a quick update of where the coordinated enrollment work is. It's really an important value of ours that we make sure that we are providing communication both to our hubs and to you guys, and trying to align that communication time-wise as much as possible. We've had some few challenges around that, but it really is a priority that we are working on. So some of the things I just wanted to put out there so everybody is aware of and on the same page is, where the work is right now. So in the ELD, there's a coordinated enrollment work group that's meeting regularly. This work group is working closely with some consultants as well as Don Barberis, who's come and is helping us. And what that group is doing is really developing an outreach and recruitment toolkit, as well as a manual for preschool promise eligibility, selection, and placement. It's great having Dawn on that work because she's all ready to they're able to speak towards the Head Start perspective as well, so that we can align things as appropriately as possible, but also be able to point out where there's some natural collaboration points. So that's been really good. You know, just like Gwen was just saying, with everything we're doing right now, we're evaluating and looking at how the current situation, both in the economy with funding and revenue, but also looking ahead towards what enrollment may look like in the next program years, what classroom structure may look like in the next program year, at least in the beginning. So trying to kind of anticipate what we can't anticipate right now. And so we'll have a clearer picture around funds and in the upcoming year soon. And that when we also have a clearer picture of the RFAs at the end of that, we'll be able to understand a little bit more about how to prioritize some of that coordinated enrollment work. So just so you guys are aware, the hubs have been having conversations with Joan Blau and her team around that. Ann Morrison is also really managing our coordinated out of respect for how the budget may change, but also within that pause, allowing space to have discussions around funding, to have some strategies for what may or may not happen in the immediate future, whether it's the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but also really encouraging the hubs to keep reaching out to you guys, to our Head Start friends, if they don't already have an established relationship in the community, to build onto that relationship in the community, to introduce themselves, but also to learn. And so really hoping that one of the small blessings from this situation is that we have a little bit more breathing space to build relationships and to collaborate. And so that's really what they've been encouraged and asked to do during this time. And I think the last thing I would say is, like you see down here at the slide, is that we would like to bring together teachers and hubs in not in the same room, but in the same virtual room for a conversation around coordinated enrollment, thoughts, feelings, dreams, hopes, all of that. And how that strikes you guys, if this sounds like a good thing, if you're ready for it, if there are some pieces you'd like for us to do ahead of time. And that doesn't have to be answered right now. I think if you want to ruminate on that a little bit too, you're always free to email me or call me, all of those things as well. So those are just my brief little updates around coordinated enrollment that I wanted to share with everybody. Again, trying to keep everybody in the same loop, although sometimes there's several loops, so we have to figure out how to tie them together. If there are questions in the chat box, I can't see them, so if there's anything pressing, please let me know. Otherwise,
Donna says that they're already planning a meeting. She says they're on top of it.
great. Then I'm going to take that as a positive, that yes, this seems like a good thing to do. And Donna, please let us know how we can support, participate, inform, and most importantly, listen to what is really brought together in that meeting.
Julie Novakowski from Community Action in Washington County, where it's probably cloudy as well, says that they have a cool document that they developed with their school district around coordinated enrollment she'd like to share. And so send that in and we'll get it out.
Great, thank you.
Marguerite asks, is the coordinated enrollment project specific to preschool age children?
Currently it is, yes. I imagine in the future we will broaden it out to include prenatal to 3 as well, but currently we're looking at preschool promise.
And Pam's question is a budget question, back to maybe to Gwen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know Andy has to leave, so I was waiting. Are there any other questions around coordinated enrollment? If not, and we can fill them later, Andy, after you go. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's flexibility. Have a great morning.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I think, so Michael, if we go back to the agenda slide and we can talk a little bit more. So we've kind of talked about the delay in the intent. And so I'm wondering if it seems like it's kind of going into the budget and revenue forecast.
Yep.
And maybe
Yep.
addressing that, and then we can go back to the review committee materials. And how does that sound? Is that okay?
Yep.
Kind of go with the flow of questioning. Okay, so, and now I'm not able to see everything big. I'm so sorry. So let's see, I'm gonna have to try to do this different. Okay, so to the budget and revenue forecast, the numbers that we are currently working on, I know that previously when Miriam came on and shared with you the exercise that we had been asked to do on our general funds, and that exercise was an 8.5% cut across all allocations. And there were some great questions during that meeting. And I think that a lot of people sort of got a better sense of how the general fund allocations are impacted, or OPK allocations are impacted with the cut. So currently, we are looking at a potential 4% reduction on general funds. So that's better than the 8.5. But like I said, that could shift, but that's where we're at right now. And so that would be on, any of our, like, if we had no SSA dollars and we were just going to kind of continue current service levels, that would be a 4% reduction. On the OPK allocation, that's around 7.5 million. The 8.5 was just under 15 million. So you can see it's like the 4 is around a $7 million potential reduction in general funds. Now, what we're hopeful about is that our governor is in very strong support of early learning programs and has said that she has a commitment to ensuring that early learning programs are sustained, that we do not have a reduction at this high time of need for families. And so we're going to, hope that she's able to fulfill that, but there would be some hurdles in the way, like some laws. And so that gets into the Student Success Act, which has our early investment account. And so if our programming was to be held harmless, that would require a legislation. Because currently the way the law is written is that the funds are distributed in a certain pattern between the K-12 and the early investment account. So there's the student investment account, and then the early learning investment account, there's actually some sort of off the top sort of funding that goes into the K-12 system. So that would be, I'm just letting you know, like in the time frames we're looking at, and that would take legislative action to be able to hold us harmless with reduction in revenue. So that's, and to some of the questions earlier around the timing, you can see why this is tricky, because if these other moving parts around, preserving early learning investments, and were not part of the discussion, which, we should all be really glad that they are part of the discussion, but it would just be maybe just like, okay, here are the straight cuts, and we would know what the amounts are. But this is why it's sort of fluid right now. It's because there is conversation around, ensuring that we're not, that we're preserving our early learning investments. So, and I think that Donna, I don't know if you want to speak to that some. I know that you've been, I know you have a meeting tomorrow, so I don't want to, have you speak when you have the whole opportunity tomorrow to talk too. If there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Well, I can add that You know, we are trying to launch an effort with the governor and the legislature from all programs to just encourage them to not reduce our funding, because one, we've made a lot of progress. Two, there are going to be a lot more families who are eligible for services now because of COVID, and that we support families who are hit the hardest, and we provide more services than just preschool. So we are a program that would be an added value to everything that's going on with the legislature or in the state. So we'll see what's happening so far. The response from the legislature has been very positive. But of course, nobody makes a commitment because, you know, they hold it all close until the very end. But we are hopeful, and we're just going to keep working until we get the answer we want.
Thanks, Donna. Yes, like I said. And I was looking to see if there's any new questions. So 4%, like I said, so we're kind of operating, or, you know, with our scenario planning now, it's looking at potential 4% cut to general fund. And then the forecast for potential reduction to the early investment accounts is a 30% reduction. So that's where kind of a bigger hit happens. And it makes sense that that might be the percentage. We collected revenue for the Student Success Act for 3/4 of the, you know, the biennium. And then COVID hit in the 4th quarter. And so it's, you know, it kind of makes sense that it's about a 25 to 30% reduction. That's not, like I said, the 30% is, if you think about when COVID hit, it makes sense that that's when the revenue started to, you know, not come in. So a potential 30% reduction on the early investment account line items for OPK. Originally, we were anticipated to have $22.3 million for our prenatal 3 programming. A 30% cut would bring that down to around 15.6 or 16 million. And then for the 3 to 5 programming, and where most of the enhancements are as well, that's the 44 million, and the 30% reduction would bring that down to just over 31 million. So you can see that that's those are some tough cuts to kind of, you know, to swallow when we all had a lot of hopes for what those dollars would bring to our communities and to our staff. So that's where we're at with our sort of most current, you know, scenario planning. And to Donna's point, it's like, you know, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that there's a way for our programming to be not impacted at this level. Held harmless would be ideal, but I think that might be a, you know, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. So, and that's why, like I said, why right now we're sort of in this place of not sure with our intent to awards, you know, what the actual amount we have to allocate is. And we're not allowed to enter into any agreements without us without us having the money in the ELD sort of coffers in order to allocate out to you in grant agreements. So that's where we're at. So are there any new questions? Let's see. So Pam, to your question about staff layoffs, you know, I started with the, you know, indicating the general funds of that 4% potential decrease. Then, you know, that's without any of the expansion. So I'm hoping that gives you some, maybe, you know, I can't say yes or no around, you know, your HR and how this will impact your staffing, but hopefully those numbers for some of your own scenario planning can help you think about that. But it's like sort of on current service levels, it's to the general fund, it's looking like a potential 4% reduction at this point in time. Right. Donna, before we move on, anything else that's kind of in alignment with your understanding of where things are at right now? Things move quickly, so sure.
That's about where it is, but daily things, change. And not having the legislature in session does make it a little bit more complicated. And having COVID makes it a little bit more complicated too. So we're just going to keep chipping away at it until we come up with a good solution. And we've been successful before. So even at a time when everybody else is taking a 10% cut, ours wind up only being 2%. So you can't plan on it, but we're doing our best to make sure that we don't have any cuts at all.
Thank you. Marguerite has a question. So the 30% cut to SSA will remain unless the legislature changes that. Am I right that the full legislature would need to convene to make that type of change? I'm more of a program wonk than a policy wonk, Marguerite. So, my understanding is that, yeah, since it would need to be a legislative change, that we would need to have a full legislature. But I will confirm that. And Donna, if you can confirm that, go right ahead. That would be my understanding.
Correct.
And in that 30%, yeah, okay. Yeah, that it would need a legislative act to change the way in which the allocations in the student investment account and the early investment account would be shifted or changed. And like I said, that 30% is like kind of our forecasting right now. That's not a set in stone at this point in time, but that's the forecasting. So, all right, yeah.
One of the things always is that we give it our best guess today, but it's always just a guess, because until the ink is dry on the paper, things move so quickly and change so fast that it makes it difficult to plan, but it's the way that it works when you're working with the legislature. It just moves quickly and differently all the time.
Yes. So we will keep you posted, and I know our next meeting's in July, but I have a feeling that between now and that meeting, there will need to be a lot of communication between all of us. So I just kind of throw that out there, that there might be meetings that we just want to get everybody together again, and as we're moving this work forward and as we get more information. So I just in advance appreciate your flexibility, and so that we can keep you, abreast of any new developments in this and our progress. So I think I don't see any new questions around the budget in the box. So Michael, do you want to share where the review committee materials are? We'll go back to that, and then the salary plan TA stuff.
Oh no, we can't hear you, Michael.
Sure, thank you. Since we talked last, we were able to pull together our virtual review committee with wonderful early educators from around the state, people who are knowledgeable and experts in our world, including parents and former directors and so forth. That review committee, over an incredibly long day, reviewed all 30 applications that we received for OPK, and they were able to develop some prioritized recommendations for Miriam going forward. Many of the materials from that review committee are public and have been posted, so I wanted to show you that, where that is, and that involves doing some clicking here, so sorry about that. But it's an potentially odd place, not necessarily intuitive, but it's in the Early Learning Council meeting calendar. Feel free to make a note of that, although it is hyperlinked in the slides. The Early Learning Council meeting calendar, and it includes materials for all of the ELD grant application review committees. So you think our long day was tough. Preschool Promise had 3 days of application reviews, and for each of those meetings, you can go into them and find cool stuff. So if you view the details on the OPK review committee meeting, you can find the agenda. You can find the sector plans at a glance, which is something that the review committee looked at quite a lot in terms of thinking about your applications. And you can find the applications that were submitted by all applicants. So that's what's online right now. There are other materials that will be posted, but that's what we have right now. So just wanted to cue you that. And if you're applying for other grants or you're curious about the other grants, you can go into the review committee for those grants as well. So I'll just pause. I don't see any questions, but we wanted to give you a heads up that that's available for you. Which then brings us, since seeing no other topics, we wanted to let you know that we are so excited to be working with you on your salary plans. I think about half of you were able to submit proposals that where you're able to meet all of the minimums for all teachers at all steps established by the Early Learning Council. And that's fantastic. And for those of you, but we want to know more. So, so this is kind of a heads up to be on the lookout for us reaching out to some of you about your proposed salary plans. Some of them, you're not meeting all minimums or even most minimums, maybe some or even none. So we want to know more about that. We want to know about what your thinking is around that and what your process was around developing that plan. Some of you, you have proposed such compression that we're worried for you, and we want to work with you on, is that really the best plan? So if your minimum proposed for a teacher is the same as your proposed average, we're gonna come talk to you about that, because that's not a practical solution to the requirements of the legislature. And that's what the language in the legislature is. It says we're going to meet these requirements as practicable. So when we, in our estimation, have a curiosity about your plan, we're going to work with you on that and just see, to learn more about your thinking, to learn more about your process. You might be even interested in submitting a revised plan. Who knows? The future is bright. So we want to give you a heads up that that's happening. So be on the lookout for that. Pause, it refreshes. Okay. So not seeing anything else on that. I don't see Nathan here, but maybe I'm wrong. I thought Nathan would be here. Oh, there is a question. Hi, Kim. Kim asks, with the cuts coming, will we still be implementing the salary enhancements? So in Spanish, you have the advantage because you can start a sentence with an upside down question mark. I sort of feel like that's appropriate in this situation. So my answer is going to have an upside down question mark at the beginning and a question mark at the end. And the upside down says, well, we don't know what the budget is, and we don't know yet fully what are the priorities. So that's the first thing I'd say. But then the second thing I'd say is there was a law passed by the legislature. The Secretary of State developed statutes from that law. That law had administrative rules that apply to our program, and those rules then influence the development of the grant that we're going to offer you. So there's a pretty strong chain of, we are here to implement this legislation and we've got some money to do it. And beyond that, and going back to the first part, we don't know what the budget is and we don't know what the priorities are going to land. We're planning to implement until we are told to do something different. To the extent practicable is the key phrase, perhaps, in the legislation. You know, if you did the math problem and you didn't have enough money to meet all the minimums, well, it's just not practical. But that's different from other potential responses that we got that people weren't meeting minimums for maybe other reasons, not about practicality, but about some other stuff. So, so I don't know if that answers your question, Kim, but we're proceeding as if until we know different.
Yeah, I might, Michael, if it's okay, I'll just add to that because I'll go back to something I said, and I was thinking it might be helpful for us to afterwards send out some of the language that's in the, there's the legislation for the Student Success Act, which is like the budget aspect of it, but then it's sort of, there's the other legislation, I call it House Bill 5047, I might have got that wrong, so I'll have to look that up, but actually tells us like how we're supposed to spend the money. And so it might be, what I can do is pull that language out and we can send it out to everyone so you can see sort of what activities in our expansion and enhancements are in sort of what line items. And that might help because I think, Kim, to your question, most of the enhancements fit in what we would call like our preschool age line item. And because there wasn't like a large expansion of preschool services, I should say new slots, there was enhancements included the duration, extended duration, salaries, transportation, and then other retention strategies. So it's kind of all wrapped up in that line item. And there was some part day expansion that allowed us to open up the RFA to potentially new OPK grantees. But then in early Head Start, it was really a service expansion that, kind of bundled then any of those salary requirements because, you're all your staff. So I hope that helps. Like the EHS, the prenatal to 3 was more of like a service expansion. The line item for the preschool age, it was where a lot of the enhancements for extended duration and salaries is kind of held. But we can send that out so you can kind of see that. I'm a visual person, so, and I know it's not on the screen, so we'll try to get that out to you.
Great. I just want to pause and see if Nathan's arrived. I didn't see him, so all right. So let's keep on keeping on. It may be new temporary order. Is that the right thing?
Yeah, sorry. Is Nathan here? I got caught up in Suzanne's
Nope.
question.
No.
Okay. So sorry, that was a squirrel. Sorry, Suzanne. Sorry. So Suzanne said, in other words, if we reduce by 30% as a projection, then the money isn't there. I guess I'm a little bit, eventually we'll know what money, like to the penny, what money is not there. Right now, it's sort of the forecasting that there will be a 30% reduction. And so if that's an accurate forecast, then yeah, the money, the revenue is not there. So I don't know, Suzanne, if that answers the question. But right now it's kind of the most current forecasting on it as they're kind of getting, more specific on the amount.
Okay.
So, and also one positive thing, I don't even know if it's positive so at this point, but with general funds, they expire at the end of the biennium, right? So if we don't spend them, they expire, they go back into the, into the kitty, into the big, with any revenue that comes from SSA, we can roll that over. So, so I say that because because it's a variable sort of, funding stream that allows us more flexibility down the road. I think this first year of funding, there's no reserve. It's just whatever we collected as a state that, the first year of the biennium. But in future years, it might allow us to weather some ups and downs of GF potentially. So I don't know, I can't see into the future, but it is, once it gets rolling, it's a more flexible funding source than general funds. So that hopefully will help us in the future. Okay, so temp order. So this is, thank you, Michael, for moving this along. I wanted to let all of you, be aware that there is a new temp order that just came out yesterday, and we can send it out. Like I said, it kind of was posted last night after 5:30, so I don't think many people have seen it yet, but it did get posted to our website. But what I wanted to inform you is that I think this is the language that we were kind of hoping would get added in. We worked forming a team with the Office of Child Care and ensuring that all of your summer programming or any services that you would want to be providing or have resources to provide are kind of called out, and that you're able to serve families that are eligible for Head Start services, and that this kind of gives you an exception to the prioritizing the essential workers. So for your summer programming, this means that you can prioritize the families that were in your care, those that are heading into kindergarten, and just sort of follow your standards for Head Start. So the exception is for respite care, relief nurseries, federal Head Start programs offering summer school and recorded programs. So, and so I just wanted to kind of let you know that if some of you were worried. You are though required to submit an emergency child care registration, okay, to offer any type of care right now on site. That's still under the governor's order that all, and I know that we don't consider Head Start necessarily child care, but it falls under the Office of Child Care regulatory structure. So we still need you to submit those emergency child care applications. We've worked with the Office of Child Care to make sure those get approved quickly. They know that you are doing summer programming, and so they're prepared for those applications to come in. And then, but with this new temp order, just wanted you to know that it becomes your choice if you decide to prioritize essential workers amongst the families that have requested services, or whether you decide that to meet the needs of your community and the families that have requested your services, that you're exempt from that. So any questions on that?
Yeah, Gwen, there are some questions in the chat
Okay.
box. Julie Novakowski says, does the ECC application still be submitted if we plan to resume regular year-round services? And I think we should be really clear. If you are planning on having any child on site at your center, any center, for any reason, you must register for emergency childcare. If before the governor lifts those restrictions, that's the only way you can have children on site, is if you register for emergency childcare.
Correct. Yep.
And then
Yeah.
Charlene, if we have any projections, we do not. I think, again, like the governor said, science is going to determine when those restrictions are lifted. And with the phase 1 and phase 2, those things will come out. We don't have any projections on that.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that, Charlene, thanks for the question, because I've tried to wrap my head around this a little bit. There will be some of you who have to follow different phases, to Lindsay's point. Like your community might be in phase 1 or another community might be in phase 2. So I want to make sure that all of you, are aware of sort of what phase of sort of, I don't know if reopening is the right term. So I'm just like, but whatever phase your community's in related to COVID-19 response, that we have appropriate guidance for you for the care of children. And so, and I think it's going to be tricky because you might be in a phase 2, but then there's a rise in, incidences of COVID-19. And so it might, your community might pull back into phase 1. So I think it's going to be fluid. And so we're really trying to make sure that the guidance for emergency child care is fluid as well, and that you have the appropriate information to care for the children, to protect your safety, your staff safety, and the children's safety. So I think it's going to be fluid for a while. Yeah, and until, to Lindsay's point, like until the governor's order is lifted, we will all, everything has to be under emergency childcare. And just, you know, there are some, I don't want to say advantages, that's not at all, this is not, but it helps us also track for funds that have come into the state through FEMA and some of the CARES Act funds. There are some abilities, and I know Lindsay has some, you know, classroom, you know, setups that are ready to go that we were able to, you know, we were trying to purchase with the emergency child care, getting it out into emergency child care if needed. And so there are some it's important for us to track during the COVID-19 health emergency, you know, what services were provided, and because there is sometimes a connection to some of the CARES Act funds that came to the state. So.
We have a few more things in the chat box. Darcy says, what is our plan if restrictions on groups of 10 are not lifted by the beginning of the program year? And Darcy, like Gwen just said, everything is fluid. We're writing guidance on you know, stable groups and those sort of things, but we're going to have to continue to respond and make those plans as the summer progresses and as we know, you know, what phases are happening for reopening and so on. I think, you know, there's lots of things to be thought about, and I think we, as well as the Office of Head Start, know that we have to be a little flexible in response to COVID, and so you know, we'll be thinking about that and probably engaging you guys in those conversations as they happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I would, you know, I think this is a time, like we mentioned in the last meeting, like for different scenario planning, right? What does it look like? What is your program? How does your program operate if the stable group size of 10 is still in place? What does it look like if it's removed? And then for kind of the ELD work and working with Region 10 is making sure that we're aligning our service, like standards for service delivery during reduced group sizes. And all of you are doing an incredible job of services. Like the level of services is out, you know, just beyond what anyone I think could have expected during this time. And so I think it's, you know, it'll be upon us as the ELD in collaboration with Region 10 to kind of figure out how we are tracking that so that, you know, if you're only able to serve X amount of children on site, but offering some remote and virtual learning and supports and services, like how are we capturing that in, you know, in the reporting to verify and justify, you know, the full funding that we have available. So, and like I said, it's not, you don't have to justify it to me. There's other people who who ask the questions, but just so we can, you know, collect that, and I think we have, like, and so we're working on that, Darcy, as well. Yeah, good question, Kathleen. I'm wondering too how she asked a question about if kindergarten is going to be remote in the fall, how that might affect all of you. I'd be curious to hear from you how you think that might impact you. I appreciate the question. I hadn't thought of that yet, so I think it'll be a good one for us to think about. And if any of you have concerns, ideas around how that might, let us know so that we can be planning with you and in support of your plans and implementation. Okay. Reduction in class time, stage required. Good questions.
Yeah, Stephanie Wetzel's asking about guidance for reopening groups around group size and restrictions. We have all of that guidance for emergency childcare available right now. It's for what is happening right now. It's not for the fall. It's not for the phases of reopening, but it is around stable group size, cleaning, sanitation. All of that guidance already exists. So we can send that out to you if you would like. But again, none of that is pertaining to reopening classes in the fall, because we just, I think it's been said a lot of times, if we had a crystal ball, things would be a lot easier. We could fully forecast what it will look like.
But what I'm seeing is, like, on these questions, you're all great questions. I'm going to just volunteer. Like, I think we need to start an FAQ around this, as all of you are, starting to open up for summer programming and thinking, as all of you do this time, for fall programming. So because we don't have all the answers to these great questions, sorry, Stephanie, but so we'll capture these, and I think we'll start an FAQ and make sure that that's updated and that we're keeping you as informed as possible with the resources and the Q&A. So that'll be, yeah. Okay. So, Kathleen, thank you. Kathleen said, if you can't see it, we're working on plans A through Z. Yeah, I hear you, Kathleen. It's definitely how it feels. I definitely know. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I think that's the new temp order. Next, Michael, I'm not sure where we're moving towards. Is it respite care next? If you could advance the slide, if that's possible, that'd be great. All right, so Meredith Russell is a new member of our program unit. She used to work primarily on Spark and QRIS, and she has moved into our team and is providing support to multiple programs, but with a focus on relief nurseries. But so I just wanted to give her credit. She's been working on a model for respite care for some respite care grants. And so Lindsay's going to talk about this a little bit in a little more detail, but I just want to give you kind of a high-level overview. So these respite care grants will be available to OPK and relief nurseries. The timing for them will be June through December, and I know it's already in June. So with U.S. funding, it's approximately $12,000 per month per classroom. And so, but that's, I say approximately because infant toddler care is more expensive than preschool care, and so there's some variation in that. But I just want to give you some kind of a ballpark number to think about. The model is 2 days per week, 3 hours per day. There's opportunities for preschool and infant and toddler respite care, but it would have to follow all of the health and safety guidelines that we just referred to, and would have to register as an emergency child care provider. And as you saw in that last slide around the new temp order, respite care is exempt from prioritizing essential workers. So this is really an opportunity for families who are connected to Child Protective Services, DHS in some way, really wanting to make sure that there are some really concrete supports for families that might have some increased stressors in their lives right now. And this is just sort of it's, like I said, it's really respite care. It's not Head Start services. It's not, this is really just an opportunity for families, either families with in-home placements or families who are children in the foster care system and their families. So more to come on that. At this point, it's OPK relief nurseries. If we find communities where OPK and relief nurseries aren't able to meet the need, then we might open up the grant opportunity to other providers who would be willing to offer respite care. That. I don't know if it's a
Next slide. Oh, I didn't hear you.
Mike, we're all set on that one. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I couldn't tell if it was the system. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that mean we're moving to Teresa?
Yeah.
Great. Teresa, you're up.
Yay. Well, I'm going to be short today. The first thing is, I believe all of you have received notification from EGIMS that your grants are ending. That is to let you know that you will have 45 days from June 30 to finish claiming for funds expended through June 30. And again, this is only for funds expended through June 30. Anything that hasn't been spent by then cannot be claimed after that point. So if there are any questions for that, I will return to that as soon as I finish this next part, which is the data collections. Unlike the PIR, the OPK model and student data collections are fairly basic collections regarding demographics and information that we still want, even in light of COVID, because it will give us a historical pattern of children served. Because of an error in the data system, the collection was dropped on accident and is being reset. So that will be opening later than we planned, and the collections will open on June 18th. Because of that, they will also stay open through the end of September for data collection to give you some more time, given your abilities to get things together because of, again, COVID. So any questions about that? We're going to include the new dates when we do updates about deliverables for this grant cycle versus the next grant cycle. And I think that's really all I have at the moment.
Thanks, Teresa. And I apologize, Teresa. Teresa's working with Meredith on those respite care grants. So thank you, Teresa, for your involvement in that as well. So if you
I get my hands in everything because I'm also working on coordinated enrollment. So
yes,
I'm everywhere.
Yes, I should remember to recognize you in that role, so that you've got your hands in all of that.
You should redo the Johnny Cash song, Teresa. I've been everywhere.
Which one? Oh yeah, I should.
OPK relief. They could just list them all. EGMs.
Yet another motivation for actually learning my ukulele that I have
Smart
during
sheet.
this time.
I'm going to work on that for you. Just one verse to do it. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Teresa. It's another slide on respite care. It's the Lindsay slide? Yeah, cool.
It's a slide. You know, as the conversation got started about respite care, we were really thinking about the needs of children and families who will need respite care. And so, you know, that's how respite care got started. It's a system being created to provide respite to families who need it the most. And we, in thinking about who's best suited to provide that care, it's you, and it's Relief Nurseries. So, you know, we're sorry for placing that on you, kind of, but the thing is that you guys have the skills. You're the experts in providing care to families who have been connected to DHS, and it's really you guys in Relief Nurseries that are able to maintain the connections and relationships and have those connections and relationships, and the ability to ensure that care is responsive to trauma and culturally sensitive. So, you know, one of the things that we know or have learned, which y'all have learned recently, is that your funding for summer services from the Office of Head Start are different. And for Oregon, because we have such a large state presence in Head Start, some of that has been a little detrimental to some of your programs in regards to funding for summer programming. So what we're hoping is that this can help to provide another layer to your summer funding that can allow you to serve families who are extremely high risk. And, you know, specifically, you know, my point was every Head Start teacher knows the family that they need or want to check in with more than once a week. Every family worker knows who these families are. Most of our directors are in tune with that as well. So tapping into your knowledge of your children and families and the ability to provide respite care seems to be a really good way for us to kind of gather what folks really need. Michael, will you go to the next slide, please? So as we're really thinking about this, and you know, the funding is available, and if you see it and you're like, yes, I want to provide respite care, I know my families, I have 3-year-olds who wouldn't qualify necessarily for my summer programming, so this would fit well. These are the things that we're hoping that you can consider. And I'm going to be sending out a survey later on. We have some information to gather from you, and the survey may feel a little bit disjointed. It'll be on a few different things, but it's the way that I was able to not bother you more than once for different information. So I'm just going to read these questions, and then if you guys have questions around respite, I'd be really happy to quickly answer them as best as I can. So do you already know how many families that you serve that are currently affiliated with DHS, not including foster families? And that came from Meredith. She said, you know, we already know who our foster families are. They have a little more resources than some of our families who are children with families of origin connected with DHS. So if you guys have the ability to find that information, that would be really great. Would you be willing to serve those families in a respite care model, whether that is, you know, the 2 days a week, 3 hours a day, or if that fits into your summer programming in a different way with more than 2 days a week and 3 hours a day? If you're applying to do summer school, would you already be serving families that fall into that into this respite category? If you're a state-funded only program who's not receiving Office of Head Start funding for summer, would you be willing to do respite care with your currently enrolled families? And then also with DHS, or the next one, would you be willing to take DHS referrals for families that are not currently enrolled in your program? And, you know, that would mean DHS families that maybe don't meet Head Start eligible requirements for income guidelines. And then the other thing to consider, respite care is offered to the whole family. So would you be able to offer care to, you know, infants and toddlers as well as school-age children? So just those are the things to think about, and things that I'll probably be asking you about in a survey to come by the end of the week.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, there
There
are
are a
some
couple questions.
Marguerite says, what is the timeline for the release of the respite grant RFA? Gwen, do you have an answer for that question? Okay.
Yeah. As you saw in the slide that I shared, you know, we were really hoping to get these started in June. And Teresa might be able to add into this. So there's a few mechanisms that we can use to get money out the door, and one of them is to amend existing grants or contracts, which can take some time. And we are learning with our new SurveyMonkey Apply system that there's and with us doing grants internally and not going through the OD procurement office, that we're learning at the ELD. We're building our capacity around how to sort of turn grants around more quickly. We're getting some practice with the emergency child care grants that have been going out to providers through the CARES Act fund. So that's what we're waiting on right now, is determining whether it would be better to do an amendment to existing contracts or grants, or if this would be sort of a separate grant that would be sort of just internal to the ELD that you would apply through, like SurveyMonkey Apply, and then we would turn around a grant agreement for the services. So Teresa, did you want it? So that's where we're kind of hung up right now, is just kind of making that decision. But Teresa, did you have any update on that from Katie at all, or?
No, I don't have any update at the moment. I think what we're waiting for is a determination as to how we're going to grant the funds. My preference, gang, is to do a separate grant. But whether that will happen,
that's what we're hoping.
Implement either way.
Yeah, so that's what we're hoping for. So Marguerite and Darcy, I think as soon as we can figure out that mechanism, like I said, we'll be letting you know. The survey that Lindsay will be sending out is kind of like a preliminary. We just want to make sure that that the grant application, as you know, and the statement of work is in alignment with sort of community need and our, like I said, the nurseries and OPKs, and so we'll be getting that quickly. Like I said, we are hoping to run the respite care. With our budgeting, we think we have enough resources to serve around 200 to 250 families across the state. So it's not a large number, but potentially So that's what we're hoping. Okay. I think that's it on respite care, Michael.
Okay.
Don't know what's next.
So we just have a few minutes left for a few resources headed your way. I wanted to highlight this webinar, which is coming up. Ooh, some cool graphics there. It took me a while to work on that. Well, this is a webinar module that's already online. You can just access it without needing to sign up for anything. But given the challenges and the priorities that we have for equity in our programming, I thought this was something worth highlighting, which is the ways, and this is referenced in Miriam's letter too, just the ways that we are culturally responsive and how we think about culture and equity and teaching and learning in the early years. And I just point out that it's not just a video, it's also slides from the video, some different resources, some different action guides and so forth. So if you're thinking about professional development, especially remote, and you're thinking about how to be responsive to the demands for justice, then this is a potentially good resource. Maybe you might be planning virtual home visits, or you and your teams are, in which case I'd encourage your folks to consider this webinar, which is coming up next Wednesday, or as Grandma Jeannie used to say, next Wednesday. It's at noon our time, unless you're Sue Robnet, in which case it's not at noon. But this is something that we know that you're already doing, but sometimes we are in the position where we ask people to do things and then we think about how we're going to help them get the training they need to do them. So people are doing them well already, and I'm sure there are folks who would appreciate some thinking about, well, how do we do this? What does that look like? How do we document what we're doing? How do we prioritize? Yeah. So that webinar is coming up. And then I just wanted to highlight a collection of resources that are being grouped under the sort of the umbrella of Head Start Heals. So this is specifically addressing questions around trauma, around how do we link questions of addiction, of dealing with the challenges of poverty, of toxic stress, to mental health. So this is this Head Start Heals campaign is a way to think about sort of a collection of ideas and principles and practices that it's important to dive in individually, but then also maybe to think about how they all kind of sync up and link up. And they are, for example, they're offering this webinar next Thursday, which is at noon, unless you're Sue Robnet, preparing for challenging conversations. So we know that one of the most challenging things that happens in our field is that our teachers and our family workers find themselves in very difficult conversations with families. And I can remember the first couple of times I talked to a family as a assistant teacher. I was going to say young, but I wasn't that young, but to sort of discover that they were homeless and what to do with that. So this webinar is around how do you get yourself ready to have those conversations, which are often really difficult on their own. And then when you have differences of family circumstance or of ethnicity or language or how people are racialized, then those become even more difficult. So this webinar, again, under the umbrella of Head Start Heals, is maybe a chance for people to do some thinking and some practicing and some preparing for having difficult conversations, because we're often the people to have those conversations with our families. So that's what I have around resources. All these are linked in the slides, and you get a link to the slides with the registration. Yes, you do. And they're also linked in the website. And with that, that concludes our slides. Right at 10:30, look at that. Like we planned it. So next meeting, I don't have a slide here because, well, all I will say is that we're gonna send out an invitation for the first Wednesday of July. So that is the 1st. I'm just thinking about that. It's the 1st of July. Okay, so that's when that is. It's 4 weeks from today. It'll be at 9 o'clock. It'll be online. These are the things we know. Look, we do know some things. Not everything is needing a crystal ball. Other thoughts, comments from my colleagues?
No, just want to thank everybody for their time, for their service. I'm just hoping all of you are staying well and taking care of yourself and those that are close to you. And I didn't know if Donna had anything. I know that there's a meeting tomorrow. Donna, did you want to say anything parting?
No, I think we covered it all. And our meeting is actually this afternoon.
Oh, right. Sorry. I keep thinking, I knew it was after. For some reason, I thought it was like after, like tomorrow.
After later.
Yes. So a
After
day
later.
of meetings. Okay. So, well, let us know if there's any information that's needed, that comes up in that conversation that we can support Donna.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Be in touch. Feel free to reach out if you want to check in or you're feeling stuck. And we'll see you for sure in a month. Talk to you sooner, I'm sure. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.